3rd, 1995.
You ever see something like this?
No, sir.
Now look, me talking about what happened back then, that ain't gonna do you any good now.
There might be some connection. Whatever you can tell us.
Yeah, let me see what you got. Yeah, my memory.
You know, the detective's curse solution was right under my nose, but I was paying attention to the wrong clues.
What have you been doing, Marty?
This is a world where nothing is solved.
You know why the story's always the same? Because it only went down the one way. You wonder ever you're a bad man?
World needs bad men. We keep the other bad men from the door.
Hi, everybody, and welcome once again to Geekfest Rants. My name is Carlos Perone, and joining me today, I have Tom LaSousa. Say hi, Tom.
Hey, thanks for having me back, Carlos.
Well, thank you for joining us again, Tom. Today, we're going to hit a new series that just wrapped up probably a few weeks ago. It's an HBO series, which, you know, there's usually a good pedigree when it comes to HBO. Every now and then, they kind of hit it out of the park, and to me, this was a definite home run in terms of, you know, wow, talk about a series that you could not put on a network for more reasons than others. Right. We're talking about True Detective. Now, Tom, tell us a little bit about, you know, when did you first even hear of this series?
Oh, gosh. It was definitely a few months ago. I know that a bunch of my friends were screaming about it. Oh, my God, you have to watch True Detective. And I have a bad tendency to be a late bloomer or a late comer to a lot of games. Full disclosure, it happened with Battlestar Galactica. I didn't get into that until like season 3 or so. And so it was the same thing with True Detective. As a matter of fact, I started watching it 2 weeks, I think, after the season finale was done. So, and I don't even know how I managed to escape spoilers. I don't know how, you know, I mean, normally when something like that happens, I mean, everybody's throwing things out on Twitter and Facebook.
Especially on Facebook and stuff like that.
Absolutely. And somehow I managed to dodge it through luck or whatever. So everything was brand new to me, and I'm glad I jumped into it. I'm totally glad that I did.
Now, speaking of watching it all in one shot, you know, to binge watch a show like this is not that hard because of the format. We're already used to HBO kind of taking the lead a little bit, if you will, into that realm of shorter seasons.
Oh, yes. Good point. Absolutely. And I think that that's where this is a good success, first off. And I think that I started watching, was it 2 years ago? They started off with American Horror Story. And we caught on all pretty quickly on the fact that each season was going to be an anthology. It was going to be its own story that no matter how, there was going to be a beginning, a middle, and end, and that was it. And,
but with American Horror Story, it was even weirder because they were going to actually recycle most of the actors into new roles every season.
True. Whereas here, as everybody understands it, and this isn't a big shocker to anyone, you know, this was, like you said, this was a short series. It was 8 episodes. There was a beginning, a middle, and end to this, and that's it. Next season, when it comes back, and it is already scheduled to come back, it's a brand new cast. The 2 leads are done. Woody Harrelson and Matthew McConaughey, they are gone. So we will see a brand new story. So that was very fulfilling in that respect that, you know, there wasn't a lot of, oh gosh, okay, it's going to be another series that I have to get into, and I'm going to be watching this for 3 or 4 years. And, you know, I think in a lot of ways that helps it because, you know, you can invest your time in 8 episodes as opposed to 8 seasons or so. And, you know, if you didn't like it, okay, well, don't watch next season. And if you didn't watch this season, go watch next season. So
plus the 8-episode format is also kind of a little bit groundbreaking, I would say, because, you know, normally when you're dealing with a network show, you're dealing with 22 episodes, 23 episodes, something like that. Cable has kind of taken the lead into making them shorter, especially for certain shows where they kind of adopted a little bit, I would imagine, what you call the British model of the 12, 13 episode. But this is 8. This is even shorter than that. I mean,
absolutely.
And it works perfectly. I could tell you that there wasn't one episode that was just filler. This was all meat.
Absolutely, yes. I don't think there was really, for the most part, I mean, I don't think there was a single episode that I watched where I kind of felt like, okay, it's dragging on a little bit or anything like that. It was very well crafted, well told. The characters were characters I had genuine interest in and watching them develop as well as watching them try to unravel what they were dealing with.
Definitely. Well, the creator of the show, his name is Nick Pizzolatto, and he doesn't seem to have a lot behind him when I try to research him a little bit, except for the fact that he wrote some of the episodes for The Killing.
If you remember
The Killing, I mean, I watched it. I love the show. And one of the most controversial things about The Killing was that the first season ended and they did not tell you who the killer was. So I was a little scared watching this series, thinking, oh my God, one of the guys who is responsible for not giving you an ending is doing this other show that has me hooked. And at the end, I hope I get an ending. I hope I get something.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Am I investing, again, it's only 8 episodes.
Yeah.
But am I investing this, investing my 8 hours and not going to get some sort of a payoff at the end? It is certainly a concern. Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, on the surface, the show is a cop drama, if you will. At certain points, it teeters into like crime horror almost, and almost into the supernatural realm at one point. I did read an article close to the ending of the season where they asked the guy, are we heading in the supernatural realm now? And the guy's like, no, don't worry about it. It's going to be a straight story. There are no supernatural elements, even though we do see some weird stuff that some people see, but they kind of bring it back to normal, I guess, if you want to call it. The show, I guess you can categorize it, like I said before, it's a cop thriller, but it's also very moody. It's got this film noir, like a modern noir feel to it. Some people call it Southern Gothic or kind of Pulp Fiction-y, the type of cop story that you're dealing with.
Yes, Southern Gothic, I think, is absolutely a perfect analogy, a perfect description for this show. And you're right, there was a lot of expressions of, is there supernatural? I think, one of the things that caught my attention was particularly with, again, arguably, there's not really any supernatural, but there is certainly, and
hallucinations, if you will.
Right. Well, one of our lead characters deals with hallucinations, and then, of course, we've got, some sort of ritualistic, pagan-esque killings. Very Wicker Man, almost in some respects.
Yeah.
Very Wicker Man.
And like I said before, not only do you get a conclusion to the whole series, but it's still kind of open in a way where if they wanted to continue with this particular storyline, they could.
They could. Absolutely. And of course, obviously, whoever's listening, spoiler alert. But
yes.
Yeah, absolutely. But one of the major things, of course, is that there's this cult out there and they're doing all these horrible things and they're murdering, they're ritually sacrificing children and people. And obviously, was a bad guy caught? Yes. Were all the bad guys caught? No. And I think that was one of the beautiful moments. I know we're jumping ahead a little bit, but one of the beautiful moments was at the end when there was this recognition of we can't always get everybody. We got our guy, but that's the best we can do, and I thought that was a very good moment because to me I found that more believable than a very neatly wrapped up bow of,
right.
Look at that. There's all 10 bad guys. They're sitting on the ground. They're all in handcuffs and we're all sending them off to jail. No, that doesn't happen.
Right. And you also have to remember, one of the hints of what direction this show is going to take, getting back to the point that I made about it's not supernatural. We know it's not supernatural, but it's called True Detective, which means to me, it was kind of like, this is how a good detective work gets done.
Yes.
They keep at it and they keep at it and it might take 10, 20, 30 years or whatever. And they finally figure out, the puzzle. They put it together, but it takes time. And in the process, families are lost. People are dead. Divorces take place and all kinds of stuff happens, but they are true to their craft, if you will. Now, let's talk also a little bit about, as we start describing the show was a little jarring at first to me because they deal in 3 different time periods. So let's talk about how those time periods kind of interweave what's happening and how we're learning things through these 3 time periods.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the show, the main crux of the mystery is happening during, what was it, about 10, 15 years in the past?
1995, 2002, and 2012.
Yes, absolutely. So the mystery, the first murder takes place back then in 95, and we have our 2 protagonists, getting out there to the scene of the crime. And
that's Matthew McConaughey and Woody Harrelson.
McConaughey and Woody Harrelson playing Russ Cole and Marty Hart. So our 2 protagonists are brought into a murder case. They go to the scene of the crime where a young woman has been left dead, trussed up at a giant tree, and she has some unusual things about her. She has deer antlers in the shape of some sort of a crown are attached to her head, and she has some odd symbol either inked or tattooed to her back. And from there, as you said, it jumps forward then to the future where the two detectives now 10, 15, 20 years later are now speaking to two other individuals.
Yeah.
Two other agents.
And they look different. They look older and
yes.
just weird, like different.
Right. And I mean, you can see Marty Hart, obviously, he's an older guy, he's an older detective. But then you see Russ, and he looks broken. I mean, he's disheveled. He just looks like the last 20 years have not been a pretty picture for him. And of course, they're being interviewed by these two other agents because we find out that another murder has taken place. And so immediately, almost right off the bat, we find out that whatever's going to happen in the past, they didn't solve the crime. And I thought that was quite interesting. It was like, okay, great. So boom. Oh, wow. It's happening again. Oh, shoot. That means they didn't they didn't get their guy.
Right. They're under the impression, I mean, I guess before this meeting with these two new cops, that everything was fine and dandy at some point.
Right.
But we learned that, as they're introducing our two main characters once again, Rust is just a weird, quiet, introverted type of guy who has his own philosophy of life that is kind of out there. And Marty is more of a down-to-earth type of guy, family, kids, that sort of thing. And, he's got his demons he's wrestling with. He's unfaithful to his wife and all the problems that's causing him. And they kind of show you how these two guys are so different, but they kind of work well together. And like you said before, this initial finding of this body is what starts this whole thing going of them investigating. It's all through Louisiana, I believe, that they shot this thing. And it takes place all along the coastline and all the different, weird people that they meet along the way.
That's funny. And now that's two series that start with True that HBO has. They have True Detective and True Blood. It was funny. One of the stranger conspiracy theories that I went back after watching the show and then, and started reading, what people were speculating was going to happen. And literally one of the things, I think it was 3 or 4 episodes in, and somebody's theory was, this is going to be taking place in the world of True Blood. We just don't know it yet. I was like, wow, really?
Wow, that would have been something.
That would have been really interesting. But yeah, I think that, as you said, Marty, certainly his life is not picture perfect. And Russ, he's got certainly some sort of, it's
almost like post-traumatic stress, but from working as an undercover cop.
Yes.
He's got drug problems because he's, as an undercover cop, he apparently took a lot of drugs to kind of infiltrate groups.
And yes, absolutely. I mean, what did they say? He was about several years under a persona.
Yeah. And he's just a disaster. Now, he has a background apparently also that seems to haunt him throughout the whole series, which is something to do with a daughter that he had that died, got killed.
Yes.
Somehow, we don't know exactly what happened to her. But
I believe at one point it was alluded to that there was a car accident or that she was
like a car hit her or he hit her or somebody hit her. I don't know.
Yes, that a car hit her or something. And so basically, as unfortunately will happen, that basically was the catalyst that caused his marriage to crumble.
Right,
and so
spiral. Everything spiraled for him at that point. That turned him into basically the character we then know. Didn't they call him like the sketcher or the artist or something? Because he would always go to the crime scenes and draw pictures. Instead of taking notes, he would draw pictures of what was happening.
Was it the tax man? It was something like that. Yes.
Yeah. That's it.
Because he had that giant ledger, absolutely. That, and he was also very adept at basically getting the confession out of almost the most hardened of individuals.
Let's talk about that scene with that woman.
Oh, God.
Talk about a highlight of the series where you're like, this is different and this is dark.
Yeah, absolutely. The woman who was accused of killing her children. Yes. And he's just, oh my God. Yeah. He's just sitting there and he's just talking so gently and so softly. And, and he's definitely, I could almost envision myself, just basically confessing to the kid, to
whatever.
the murderer.
I'll sign anything. I don't care.
Right. I'll embrace, you know what? I killed JFK. Yep. That's it. I did it. Absolutely. And even though I wasn't born back then, I did it. Absolutely. That just seems to be the kind of thing that he could be capable of doing, but that's obviously not his MO. His MO is not to get a confession out of you. His goal is to get a confession out of the person that he knows needs to confess, and he succeeds without any flaws, without an issue. He gets it out of everybody.
The cherry on top of that cake is that he gets the confession and, he kind of tells her, listen, it's going to be really tough in jail, for a woman and for the type of crime you committed. I think what you should just do is go kill yourself.
Go kill yourself.
And they're watching him through the window. I don't know if they can hear what he's saying.
No, I don't think at that particular point they did.
You could almost hear the audience go, what?
What the hell did he just say to them? Right. Absolutely,
And,
yes.
again, that's your character. He's
Yeah.
a dark, dark individual.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That is almost like a little sideline of, I guess it's character development of who we are, with this character. But the investigation, like we said before, because it jumps back and forth between 3 different time periods. The first time period, the older one, is where they eventually believe they found who they're looking for. A bunch of weird swamp guys who are cooking meth or something, who have some kids that they kidnapped.
Sure.
And they're able to get in there and rescue at least one of those 2 kids. Because I think one of them was dead and the other one, or died or something like that. And the other one they were able to pull out of there. But they don't even bother arresting them. Marty's character just basically shoots one guy.
Right. Well,
Just
that was
point
because he
blank.
goes in there and he goes into the old nasty looking building and he finds the 2 children. One of them is dead and the other one is clearly just broken beyond belief. And he just walks right out and he just blasts the guy away. And of course, at that point, we're already hearing the conversation between the 2 detectives in the future about how,
There's 2 different stories. They're telling
Right.
us one story, but they're showing us a different story.
Oh my God, that was beautiful. Yes. To see how they basically had to cover the whole thing up of just taking these 2 guys down and just then saying, oh no, absolutely. We were under fire. We did, we were
all
attacked.
by the book, everything, right?
All by the book. And of course,
This is early in the series, so we are starting to see this weird relationship between these 2 guys who are so in sync with each other in terms of getting their story straight, but at the same time, they seem to hate each other's guts, and we don't know why yet. That's
Sure.
part of the second time
sure.
period.
During the past, we can already tell that there's a little bit of unsettling. Basically, like we said, because Cole is definitely, I think, with his past demons, he's taken a very dark view on life. And it's basically what he considers as we're all just basically a bunch of meatbags that have no true purpose on this planet. And he also believes, at one point, I think he said, it's his belief that our destiny is just to repeat and repeat our lives over and over and over again, never learning anything, never succeeding anything. And it's just this horrible, vicious, cruel joke, universal existential joke. And he has no problem sharing this with anybody. He clearly has no issues. He has no love for religion, for any sort of organized religion, any sort of belief of a higher being. And he has no problem sharing that with anybody. And more than one occasion, they've been in that car together. And Cole's just like, can you just please shut the F up?
Yeah,
can you
'cause-
just please stop talking about
Oh my
this in front?
God.
At first, it's like, can you not say this in front of anybody? And then finally, it's like, stop saying it in front of me. I can't handle you saying all this stuff. It's just, it's unnatural.
Because
It's
he's
not
the
right.
equivalent of a religious fanatic who is not religious.
Oh God, yes. He's like the uber atheist, uber agnostic.
It's amazing how he just doesn't stop and keeps going, and they basically have to tell him to shut up half the time.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But everybody puts up with him because he gets the job done.
Sure. But then, as you said, though, clearly in the present day, we can tell that despite the fact that Marty says, Russ is brilliant. Russ is a genius. He was the best damn detective I could ever see. As you said, there is something that has happened that we don't know about. And
they don't want to talk about it. They don't want to talk about it. And they get to the point where those 2 cops are questioning them individually, and they're questioning Marty, and they're kind of pushing him to like, what happened between you guys? And he's like, okay, I had enough. I'm leaving. So you're like, okay, we got to get to this. And this is more like, I guess, in the middle of the series, I guess by the middle episodes, where we get a little more background, obviously, on the 2002 events, which is basically everything seems to be kind of resurfacing again. They have to investigate again because apparently stuff is happening all over again.
Sure.
And just like before, there are these religious things going on. There are religious people getting involved in the investigation. There's the Reverend Tuttle who shows up early in the series.
The very powerful and influential Reverend Tuttle, yes.
Who kind of comes back in the middle, who seems to be hiding something. There's the guy who used to work for Tuttle who has his own branch of some kind of church going on, out in the sticks somewhere where he's doing weird stuff too. Then some people are talking about the Yellow King, this whole thing about the Yellow King, and this girl went looking for the Yellow King, and blah, blah, blah. The Yellow King took him, and the man with the spaghetti hair, and blah, blah, blah. All these weird little breadcrumbs are being thrown all over the place that they're pretty wacky stuff.
Well, we could get into so much talking about the Yellow King and the lost city of Carcosa because,
that's a whole other show.
That's a whole other show. My God. And I found it brilliant that
it's based on something else.
Based on these short stories anthologies by Ambrose Bierce, was a 19th century journalist and writer. And I think he was a precursor to Lovecraft. He wrote a very dark... Right. He, as well as another writer, although his name eludes me at the moment, their stories are not directly mentioned, of course, in the show, but there's a gazillion references. Like you said, the Yellow King and Carcosa, and at one point, I'm sure we'll jump to it in a minute, but when the big bad reveal comes in, he talks to about, take off your mask. I mean, these are all little lines and little references from these books. And just as a crazy, jumping off the tangent for a second, Ambrose Bierce, the writer who wrote these things, he disappeared in real life.
Oh boy.
Yeah, completely. Apparently, he was 70 years old and he went on a journey at some point and he was getting ready to go out and he was going to Mexico and he wrote a letter to a friend and the letter just simply said something along the lines of, "Now I depart. Where my journey takes me to, I am going into the unknown," and vanished from the face of the earth. So absolutely, you have to know that the showrunners, they were like, let's just take this stuff and let's just mess with people's heads. And
the show apparently is full of Easter eggs connecting that particular story and elements of that story all over this thing. There's drawings, there's tattoos, there's markings, all types of art related to that is incorporated into the story of, whatever these crazy people are doing, weaved into it. And I have a feeling this is one of these shows where you could now, even though this is only the first season, you could spend years just picking apart these 8 episodes and picking out little bits and pieces of this whole Yellow King thing.
Absolutely. It certainly is one of those series where it would merit, a couple of repeat watches just to get all the little nuances that you may have missed the first time, and somebody had said, as a matter of fact, a friend sent me a couple of PDFs of some of the short stories and said, read these as soon as you're done. And I haven't gotten a chance to start yet, but,
somebody was saying that the legend is that if you read The Yellow King, you go crazy and you kill yourself or you die or something.
Yes, The Yellow King is a short story in a larger anthology, and it's apparently a tale within a tale. From what I understand, it's like these folks are watching the play of The Yellow King, and yes, by the third act of the play, you have some sort of horrific, cathartic, the universe is an empty void of nothingness, and I might as well just off myself. Again, very Lovecraftian,
It's like the prequel to The Ring, I guess.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yes, the prequel to The Ring, and although there's no horrible tentacled monsters coming out of the deep, it has, it definitely has a Cthulhu-esque feeling there, but I think that for sure. What I appreciated about this whole thing was, it wasn't them suddenly sitting in a library going, "Look, The Yellow King, look, this book." It's now
far. It's far in the background.
Right.
And like you said before, it doesn't go into supernatural realm. It doesn't get into the Yellow King in a bizarre manner, but it seems to feed or fuel whatever these bad guys, crazy people are doing in some shape or form.
Yes.
Now, let's go a little bit into the middle, the 2002 era, where at some point, as they're investigating all over again what's going on and they have new leads and new bodies are showing up, we find out what it was the big rift between these two. And that was the fact that Marty's wife, at some point, angry at Marty because he was sleeping around, ended up sleeping with Rust.
Right. Yes, absolutely. And I think, well, first off, as we said before, Marty, had this facade of being, a wonderful husband, great father. And of course, we saw that, first off, he was sleeping around with a court stenographer. He gets caught. She threatens to leave, and then they have a reconciliation, when he promises he's going to atone. And of course, then, he falls back under the trap. And in this case, it was a former prostitute that he had encountered, when they were
when they were investigating the case.
Investigating, right. He meets her again. Now she's cleaned up and she's no longer hooking and she's working at a Verizon or a T-Mobile that he goes into. And, and he's just, "Oh, I'm so glad you got your life cleaned up." And the next thing you know, they're
going at it.
They're going at it. And then of course the wife finds the photos and the texts. And so, yes, absolutely. So she goes off and she decides that, well, maybe there was a few little maybe flirtatious moments, or at least she perceived flirtatious moments between her and Russ. And so she goes and they have sex, and then she proudly goes and tells Marty. And, somebody brought this up to me 2 days ago, and this was a very interesting comment, was that a friend of mine said, is it just me, or was there really not one single decent female character in this entire series? You had the prostitutes.
One of the daughters, maybe?
Right. Well, even right. I guess the one daughter. Right. Exactly.
The one that's not a whore.
The one that's not the quote unquote whore. Right. But even, you have the hooker who Marty helped and clearly knows that, that he's married, but no, doesn't have a problem with that. And then you had the stenographer who she decides to go and teach him a lesson by going and revealing that they were having an affair. And then even Marty's wife herself, she went to have sex with Kroll solely, really to punish Marty, knowing full well that this is going to irrevocably destroy, whatever dangerous friendship they have is just going to be shot. And even after they did it, she has this moment of like, "Oh God, what did we do?" Or I think he's more along the lines of, he has that moment, and she has the opportunity not to just be like, "Okay, you know what? I needed to do this, and now I'm walking away. It's my personal, private revenge. But no, she needs to go and tell Marty. And it's just like, wow, really? Is this just a new thing now with no redeemable females at all?
The unusual thing I found about that whole sequence is the fact that Rust was willing to just do it on the spot right there.
Yes.
There was no real like seduction in terms of over a period of time. You could say that those little visits he had here or there was some flirting going on, maybe. But you would figure that this guy is so obsessed with this case that he would be smart enough to know that if he were to screw around with this woman, his case would explode.
Absolutely.
His resources would dry up because his partner would leave him.
Sure.
So that I found a little difficult to understand, that he's just so, bam, press the button, time to go make some bacon.
Right, absolutely. I mean, and I can't even fathom that. I mean, yes, is it possible in the realm of things that since he and his wife split up after the loss of the child that he hadn't been with a woman? I guess.
I don't know.
But I would find that a little hard to suspect. I mean, especially if he was deep undercover for a couple of years.
Yeah.
He probably had to do certain things or something like that. But
and remember that they were trying to set him up with some of their friends, and he could never get things right because he was always so weird that everybody kind of like, whoa, this guy's out of his mind.
Right, absolutely.
But the fact that, but I don't know, maybe that's what they're telling you, that I don't know if it's a male-female thing that they're telling you. You said the female characters, that they're all, they're up to something. And the male characters, they're basically have no responsibility, over their over their desires.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Just like any real life situation. They were both adults. They should have known what they were doing. But yes, as you said, this is the catalyst that the next thing you know, Rust has already gotten in trouble at this point with his superiors for investigating and approaching the Reverend Tuttle. And
after being told to stay away from the guy.
After being told, stay away from it. He's an influential person. You're asking too many questions. So he gets suspended.
Right. And so 2002 is definitely the second act. The second act is 2002. The big event is the breakup between these two partners.
Sure.
The majority of the wrapping up type of events take place in the present, which is where these initial cop interviews are taking place. Rust looks like some kind of like a hippie kind of outdoorsy kind of guy. He looks nothing like he used to in the before. He's been drinking nonstop apparently since he left the police.
Well, he quits the force, and he just basically, he just realizes, he's like, it's kind of one of those, life is an empty void, so why am I doing anything? And, he just kind of, yeah, you're right. He just drinks himself into oblivion working at a bar. Marty apparently continues on the force for a little while, but that ends up for whatever reason. Oh, I remember. Oh, that was another tough moment. He talks to those two agents about what was the catalyst to make him leave. Yep. It was doing the investigation where somebody put a baby into a microwave.
Oh, yeah.
And he said, and I'm done. That was it, and I was done. So that was it. And by that point, he's by himself. His family is just completely imploded.
Right.
So we see
one of his daughters is a mess. She's like screwing around with guys, and his wife. They seem to live in a nice place. The other daughter seems to be kinda okay.
Sure.
Well, this brings us to the end of part 1 of our True Detective Season 1 recap. Please join us again next week as Tom and I continue to discuss this marvelous first season of True Detective. Until then, see you here soon at Geekfest Rants. Bye-bye, everybody.
And when you find a piece of them in your side.
See, we all got what I call a life trap. There's gene deep certainty that things will be different. Now, this is a world where nothing is solved.
What happened in 95?
The story's always the same because it only went down the one way.
Well, I can't say the job made me this way. More like me being this way made me right for the job.
Solution of my whole life was right under my nose, and I was watching everything else.
Stop.